Timothy?
Oh, no.
Yep.
Thank you.
The Corporation of the Village of Marrickville-Wolford, agenda for council on Monday, March the 8th, 2021 at 2 p.m. And I remind folks that this meeting is held in person at the council chambers. However, due to the provincial emergency orders still in effect, we are unable to safely accommodate the public at this meeting. And in order to ensure transparency, an audio recording of this meeting will be posted on the website immediately following the adjournment of the meeting. Having called the meeting to order, I'll ask if any members have a pecuniary interest. And Mr. Cameron, do you have a pecuniary interest, sir? What is the general nature of it?
There's an application here, B12-21, happens to be my neighbor on Corktown Road. It's for a severance. Just want to make sure that everyone's aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cameron. That was the B12-21?
Yeah. Yes, B12-21.
Thank you very much.
27 acres on Corktown Road.
Thank you, and the clerk has made note of that. Thank you. I do not see any other hands going up, so we will move on to approval of the agenda. And I think I will move in a seconder for that, please. Thank you, Mr. Foster, and a seconder would be, thank you, Mr. Malloy. And members, I bring to your attention that staff have indicated they are not bringing forward any in-camera items this afternoon, so they will be removed from the agenda. And also under the Council and Advisory Committee meetings report from the CAO, we'll be adding property standards. There's a requirement for 3 members, and we only have 2 at the moment. So in that discussion, we'll be giving direction to staff to put a call out for members for that. I would also like to, under correspondence, the request from Judith Herman and family to move that item to immediately follow the discussion of bylaw 12-2021 Memorial Bench and Program policy. It would make sense that we discuss the policy first and then deal with the request immediately following. So if everybody is comfortable with that, the motion would be moved by Mr. Foster, seconded by Mr. Malloy. Be it hereby resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the Village of Marrickville-Wolford does hereby approve the agenda of the regular council meeting of March the 8th, 2021 as amended. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much. And members, you can see in our agenda, we do have 2 items under planning. The consent applications B15-21 and B12-21. And we do have our consultants available from JP2G on the phone line right now. And I believe Forbes Simons is the individual from our planning, our advisory consultants. So I'll put the motion on the table, and then I'll ask Mr. Simons to speak to his report. Before I do that, I just want to confirm, Mr. Simons, you are on the line?
I am indeed, Mr. Mayor.
Great, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. So if I could have a mover and a seconder for the motion, please. Mr. Foster is the mover, and Mr. Helpney is the seconder. Be it hereby resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the Village of Marrickville-Wolford does hereby receive planning report of Forbes Simon of JP2G Consultants, Inc. regarding consent application B15-21 dated February the 24th, 2021 for information purposes. And the Council does hereby defer consideration of consent application B15-21 to allow for the matters as outlined in the aforementioned report to be addressed. And I will just, before I go to Mr. Simons, staff have provided at the table, while it was not necessary to have the complete application, they have provided it more particularly with the mapping associated with it, and it'll help members have a little bit of context to the distances that are referred to in Mr. Simons' report. Having said that, Mr. Simons, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I am just trying to find my reports, and I'm having a heck of a time finding them here. Just a second, if you would, please.
Absolutely, yes. Take your time, sir.
So, I just found it. So we're dealing with B15 right now, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, B15-21, correct.
Okay. So this application, council, I've reviewed it in some detail. The issue, let me back up. We've got a bit of a difficult time right now between the existing official plan, which is the rule of the land, and the new official plan that's pending approval at the county. And the new official plan gives much more detail to council and direction to council in terms of rural residential development. And my report's trying to find a balance between the existing policy and the new policy. And to a certain extent, I'm deferring to council on this matter. The application B15 is to create a relatively large lot. It meets with most of the policies. I don't think there's a concern with respect to setbacks from wetlands. There is an aggregate deposit that to the northwest of the property on the other side of the road that I believe the development's far enough away from. The problem is that the new mapping in the county official plan and your new official plan have a large aggregate deposit right where the lot is being proposed. And I think because it's identified on the county official plan, that this matter needs to be deferred so that they can have someone prepare an aggregate impact assessment. And I wanted council to be aware that this is a unique time with the two policy documents, but I think that the recommendation I have for deferral and to require the study is the appropriate path forward at this time. That's all I have for that file, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Simons, and I'll go to questions from the table, council members, and I see Mr. Foster and then Mr. Cameron. Mr. Foster.
Yeah, just looking at the maps from the official plan, so I guess official plan Schedule A3 hazards and constraints, the aggregate resource influence area pretty well dominates much of Pioneer Road. And I just want to know what an aggregate impact area is, influence area. So does that mean that anyone wanting to build there in the future has to go through the process of bringing in an expert to determine if they can?
Not to build there in the future, but to create the lot, they would have to do that assessment. So the idea is that prior to the lot being created, that all the necessary supporting studies are prepared so that someone getting a building permit doesn't have to worry about that stuff. So in this case, the aggregate sort of is in this one spot, seems to be onto the next neighbor's property and some of it across the road. And given that configuration, it's possible someone's going to look at it and say, well, all these pieces are fragmented and this isn't a viable resource. And that would be the type of assessment that then would come back and give council confidence to create the lot. But without that, I don't think that you should be creating that lot.
Supplementary, Mr. Foster.
Yeah, just to follow up then, Forbes, so previous to the new official plan, this wouldn't be an issue?
That's correct, sir.
So when does the new official plan come into effect?
What happened was that when the United Counties did their official plan, there were a whole bunch of new aggregate deposits identified throughout the counties. And one of them was this blob that's on the severed lot. And so we have to pay attention to that. And then when you did your new official plan, you brought in that new mapping from the county and made it your own.
Okay, but how long until the new official plan takes effect?
Probably 2 months.
So what I'm suggesting is, a few months ago, if they had gone through with this, they wouldn't have had to take on the expense of hiring a recognized expert to give them an opinion.
Well, to a certain extent, Councillor, it wasn't in your local official plan, but it was in the county official plan, and you do have to pay attention to what the county official plan says. So it was there. They would have needed to look at it, but in a different context. It wouldn't have been a local requirement. It would have been more of a county requirement.
So they would have had to go through this irregardless?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Cameron?
Thank you. I have questions along the line as Councillor Foster. I'm not sure why we are referencing the new official plan when we've had other discussions at the table, and the new official plan was not a point of discussion because it hasn't come into effect. And under the existing plan that we're operating on, it says that the wetlands within 120 meters, the land is 400 meters from wetlands, and gravel aggregate pit within 300 meters, and that land happens to be 600 meters within that requirement. So there are no pressing concerns as far as I'm concerned. They far exceed the requirements to do it, and that application for aggregate within that area can apply to probably about 80% of Wolford. So our next discussion point will bring that up as well. So I'm not understanding why we would be making that a priority. I understand it's on the official plan for the county, but it's not in our official plan. And I don't think we would consider opening up a gravel pit next to a residential home anyway. So I would move that we consider this application and allow it to move forward, because they do meet and exceed all the requirements in the present official plan. Thank you.
There aren't any other hands going up. I'll have a question for clarification, if I might, Mr. Simons. For some reason, in the back of my mind, I thought the county had passed the official plan, their official plan. That's
correct.
So the county's plan has been passed. Our municipal plan is in the process of being approved.
Correct.
So, even if we were not had not done a review and amendment of our official plan, the member municipalities that make up the county still have to utilize or rely on and have regard for the county plan, and in this particular case, the county mapping. So it's not a matter of us having a choice. We'll use our old mapping and not the new county mapping. We have to use the county mapping. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
The other thing that I think is important, Mr. Mayor, is that even though your new official plan is not in force in effect because it hasn't been approved by the county, it has been adopted by the council. It has been passed by bylaw and adopted by council. So to a certain extent, it is your most current policy expression.
Right, yes, I understand. So we're in that area, while we have passed it, it is not in force and effect technically at the
Correct.
moment. However, having said that, the county mapping, the county OP and the county mapping is in force, so we do have to have regard for that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and your recommendation it is not a matter of whether someone can get a building permit. It is to ensure, by going through with your recommendation to do the aggregate, we're looking for the word, assessment, is in a sense helping to do some due diligence for the property owner?
To a certain extent, the more dominant issue, Mr. Mayor, is making sure that existing aggregate deposits are protected so that they can be commercialized in the future.
Right,
That's the intent.
thank you.
You can put a house anywhere, you can only put a gravel deposit or gravel pit where the gravel deposit is.
Right, and that is, if I can, not sure the right word to use, but from a provincial policy planning perspective, aggregate sites are extremely important to not only identify, but to maintain and identify as a viable resource, and that's essentially what you're recommending, to determine is that a viable aggregate resource? By
Very well said,
investigating?
sir.
Okay, thank you. I saw hands up going up again, Mr. Foster, and then again, Mr. Cameron.
Just a quick question, Forbes. Once the aggregate impact assessment study has been completed by that applicant here, can other people on that road, like if he determines you're 6 inches of sand before you hit the rock, will everyone have to go through this process each time, or can they accept that that assessment was done?
Did you hear
That's a
that?
really good question, sir, and I think it would depend on what the study would actually say. If it would just talk about the deposit on the subject property and not express an opinion on the deposit in its entirety, I think it would stay focused on the property. But if the assessment had a broader look at the blob and the lands that affected, I think it would be fair to say that once it's dealt with once, it wouldn't have to be dealt with again.
And just a final question, I'm not going to hold you to it, but how much would this cost to have the aggregate resource impact assessment?
I'm doing them up in Renfrew County in the neighborhood of $3,000 to $4,000.
Thank you.
Mr. Cameron?
Yeah, just, I just have a problem with the statement that you made, Mr. Forbes, that we should be considering the new official plan. It should be part of our thought process because we have already adopted it. That plan was adopted well before our consideration for Parkview. However, that train of thought was not allowed at the table at the time. And we are currently up, yeah, that's exactly what was happening. The official plan, I had made suggestions that we operate underneath the new official plan because there were some things concerning Parkview that I had. And we were in consensus as a group here that we were to operate under the existing official plan that we're operating on. And this piece of property happens to fall into that preview because we do have a plan that's in place. We haven't adopted it. And like I said, all this aggregate consideration, it would be consideration through about 80% of Wolford. So there are a lot of deposits. There are already some existing gravel pits that we have, and the person wants to build a house on it, and there's other homes adjacent to it. So we wouldn't allow as a council, I would hope we would not allow as a council, to open up a gravel pit beside someone's home. So I think what we should be considering is that the requirements and the request meet all requirements within the existing plan that we're operating on. And I would hope that that is what we consider and not an official plan that we haven't officially adopted yet. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I may,
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Simons.
I respect that opinion very, very much. And I would support the position expressed, save and except for the fact that the county official plan also recognizes this deposit. And that changes the context. It is always a challenging time for policy interpretation when you've got an old plan that's going out the door and a new one coming in. And I would defer to what was said, that we live by the policies that are approved. However, in this case, there is the county official plan that is approved that recognizes the resource, and that's why I'm suggesting that in this circumstance, that we would also recognize the county plan and require the assessment.
And just to score it, to score your point, Mr. Simons, it's not like we have a choice. We shall have regard for the county official plan.
That's correct, sir.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Members have heard, Mr. Halfney.
Yes, I would think we should be careful because of the problem that was we had up on Jasper Road. The house was sold, and it was a horse farm, and it had to be stayed as a horse farm. People wanted to buy it and expand a little bit, so we had approved it for that, and they changed rules. So they had to reserve that official, or the official designation. So if we start putting these houses on aggregate spots, we might run into problems down the road. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Halfney. So just to clarify, Mr. Forbes, this is not the individual at this point is not looking, does not have an application to build a house. It's an application to create a lot that could potentially have a house built on it. Thank you. So, members, there is a staff recommendation. Staff have spoken to the report and hopefully clarified why it is that recommendation to have the matters to be dealt with as outlined in the report. If there aren't any additional questions, I'll call the vote. All in favor? And thank you. That's carried.
Opposed me. I'm opposed.
Yeah, it's, yeah,
I
nonetheless.
guess that was obvious with my argument.
It's always good to say, though.
Well, different point of view. Yeah, oh yeah.
And the next item on our agenda is regarding the application B12-21. So a mover for that motion, please. Mover to, not sure if, I'm going to go with Mr. Foster's, the mover, and a seconder, please. A seconder for the motion. Thank you, Mr. Malloy. Before I read the motion, I just remind that at the beginning of the meeting, Mr. Cameron indicated that he had a pecuniary interest, and the general nature of that interest was the fact that it was a neighbor, or abutting neighboring property to his own residential property. Did I capture that correctly, Mr. Cameron?
That's correct.
Yeah, thank you. So the motion reads, be it hereby resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the Village of Merrick Wolford does hereby receive planning report from Forbes Simon from JP2G Consultants, Inc. regarding consent application B12-21 dated February the 22nd, 2021 for information purposes, and that Council does hereby defer consideration of consent application B-12-21 to allow for the matters as outlined in the aforementioned report to be addressed. And again, members, not that we needed the complete application, but the application was made available at the table, and it does have mapping available again to give some context to the distances. Having said that, you're up again, Mr. Forbes. Mr. Simons, sorry.
Thank you.
I've known you for so long and I still do that. Thank you, sir.
That's okay. It's my life, sir. This policy application is a little bit more straightforward in that it's just the policies of the existing official plan that I think are the problem for this site. It does have aggregate that's shown on it in the new official plan. But I think that the issue here for council to decide is more importantly whether this represents strip development. Strip development defined in your official plan, and generally I would suggest that where you've got more than 4 houses in a row, it's not appropriate to have another property within 130 meters of that strip development area. And when looking at this application, it's my opinion that it does represent strip development. And again, the applicant has provided a letter that indicates that the property is going to be landscaped and treed, and then, in her opinion, it's not strip development. And I would suggest here the issue is up to council whether it does constitute strip development. If you believe it does constitute strip development, I don't think that there's any option for the application to proceed. I don't think it would conform, and I wouldn't recommend that they would do the study. However, if council satisfies that this doesn't constitute strip development, then I would recommend that the matter be deferred to allow for the aggregate study, the same as the last application.
Thank you. Questions, comments, and I see Mr. Cameron is up first.
Yeah, thank you. I have knowledge of the property. It runs alongside of mine. I don't believe it's going to be used for anything other than a private resident. The plan is to move from the existing house that they have on the property, which is, I believe is 110 in total, and they want to build a small retirement home. One of the concerns is they're elderly, and the property is becoming too much of a labor-intensive chore for them. There's significant tree growth between my property and the property beside me, and there's an existing fence line that runs through there. My house, from their house, there would be at least, my house is 400 feet from the property line, so where they're planning on building is about another 120 feet past that, so there's going to be well over 500 to 600 feet distance between the houses. And the houses that are in a row are up along the roadway. They would be building probably about 500 or 600 feet off, which is where my house would be. So as far as crowding houses in too close together or so on and so forth, there's plenty of property in order for them to do so. The property is going to be 400 and some feet wide and 2,600 feet deep. And it already has existing tree growth on there. There's a couple of clear little pastures in there, about 5 or 6 acres, where they want to build a home. So there should be no concern. And I would recommend, and it's going to affect me personally, but I recommend that we go forward with this. I think it's that it would pose no problems, and I've talked to a few of my other neighbors, and there's nobody in opposition of it as well. So.
Well, thank you for your, I guess I'll put it down as your opinion as opposed to recommendation. That's well spoken, Mr. Cameron. Before I make a couple of comments, Mr. Robertson, want to bring something to our attention?
Yes, Your Worship, sorry for interrupting. Just to draw council's attention to the procedure bylaw wording in section 4.3 regarding disclosures of pecuniary interest, subsection A. When a member present at a meeting has a pecuniary interest, direct or indirect, as defined by the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, the member shall, prior to any consideration of matter at the meeting, disclose the interest and the general nature thereof, and not take part in the discussion of or vote on any question in respect of the matter, and not attempt in any way, whether before, during, or after the meeting, to influence the voting on any such question. Just wanted to draw the councillor's attention to that.
Thank you. Probably not always forefront on our mind when we've made that declaration, so.
Then I would withdraw my comment.
Fair enough. And I think, how do I want to word it? It's certainly done out of interest, because Mr. Cameron was more than right up front at the beginning of the meeting, indicating that he did have a pecuniary interest. The general nature was as an abutting, certainly neighbor. And thank you for Mr. Robertson for that, and Mr. Cameron for your comment. My comment would be, and it's, if I might, just to perhaps help move it along, that in the details, sometimes there are, devil is in the details. In the application, the applicant has indicated how they're going to look after, approach it from, call that buffer perspective in tree plantings, and to ensure that takes place, so there isn't that optics, if you will, of strip development. Those things can be put in place under site plan control, as opposed to, at this point, giving the permission to move forward. So I would have that comfort level. But again, just for clarification, I think it's similar thoughts that I'm having for the previous application. And Mr. Simon, just for clarification, the county mapping has identified potential aggregate site?
Yes.
Thank you. So again, for the same reasons, because it's having regard for the county OP, the similar recommendation for to have a study done to determine if there's an aggregate site and if it would be feasible. So those would be my comments, and then go to the floor to members. And I see Mr. Malloy and then Mr. Foster. Thank you.
Okay, just one thing, Forbes.
Tim? Thanks.
Just two questions, Forbes. First, comparing the two properties, are they both about the same in terms of the aggregate found on them, size-wise?
The two properties, are you talking about the previous application you discussed?
Yeah, the one previous to this one and this one.
The previous one actually had, it appeared that the deposit was actually on site, where with this one, it appears the deposit is on a neighboring property.
Oh, okay. So it may not even be on this property.
No, but any development within 300 meters of an unknown resource needs to be assessed.
Okay, fair enough.
And I, my recollection is that the property is to the west that has deposit on it.
Okay.
The lands are to the west.
And the last question I've got, you speak of strip development. How many houses are we looking at right now in that area? Because we don't have any maps to indicate.
Let me just see. This one has 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 severances off the land directly to the east. And there's also a house in the middle of those two that's on the retained. And so I would take that as five houses, 5 laneways in a row. And typically you're looking at 4 or 5 in a row.
Okay. And what would be the distance for those 4 or 5? We talking about a mile, 2 miles?
Don't have the exact distance, but I would think that that's within a 250 meter stretch of road.
Okay, good. Thank you, sir.
And next question up was, or comment from Mr. Foster.
So as it stands for the Corktown Road property, it's outside of our control regarding the aggregate assessment, similar to the, but it is within, aggregate resource and catchment assessment, or impact assessment. So that's outside our control. but the determination of whether or not it qualifies as strip development is within our control. Is that right?
I believe the answer is yes. Is that correct, Mr. Simons?
That would be my position, Mr. Mayor.
So we could waive the concerns about strip development and then allow them to proceed to get they don't have any choice but to get the aggregate assessment.
Right.
But we could, as a council, agree to allow them to proceed without
Yes, and I think, in fairness to the applicant, they've indicated how they were going to treat the property. It was acknowledged earlier, and if it comes to that, I think that council would want to use site plan control to make sure that those performances are guaranteed. But that's why I feel it's important for council to weigh these things.
Very good, thank you.
So just to clarify, I think I'm getting from members of council, the view is not that this is not strip development, and further though, in the site plan control can request trees to be planted. It might soften any perceived strip development. There's that comfort level to not be concerned about that, and yet, and I think the recommendation does make reference to that. You know, council could agree to accept the position presented by the applicant and apply site plan control for future development of the property. So I would take place at the site plan control. So in approving the outlined motion, it would be essentially, as Mr. Foster just indicated, similar to the previous application, have the aggregate study done.
But that's beyond our control.
Yeah. If there aren't any other questions from members, I'll call the vote. All in favor of the recommendation outlined in the motion? All in favor? And this carried. Thank you. And just double checking the agenda. I think that is all that we need from planning on this agenda. Thank you, Forbes, for joining us. Appreciate your report and your managing the questions asked by council members. Thank you, sir, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Goodbye.
Bye now.
Thanks, Forbes.
And next on our agenda is the minutes of the previous meeting, and a mover and a seconder for our minutes, please. Thank you, Mr. Foster, and the seconder would be Mr. Helping. Be it hereby resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the Village of Mariford-Wolford does hereby approve does hereby approve the minutes of the regular council meeting of February the 22nd, 2021 as circulated. Any errors and or omissions? None noted. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you.
And we're not going in camera, is that right?
And next on our agenda, members, under correspondence, there's a request for a green shirt day. And I'll read the motion in a moment. Get the mover and a seconder for the motion, please. Thank you, Mr. Cameron is the mover, and a seconder would be, thank you, Mr. Foster. Whereas on April the 7th, 2018, a young Canadian named Logan Boulet became an organ donor in the aftermath of the tragic Humboldt Bronco bus crash. And whereas Logan saved the lives of 6 others, and his story inspired hundreds of thousands of people around the world to register as an organ and tissue donor. And whereas there are more than 4,000 people that are on a waiting list for transplant operations, including individuals in Mariford-Wolford area. And whereas an organ and tissue donor can save up to 8 lives and improve the life and health of up to 75 other people. And whereas the Canadian Transplant Association and the family of Logan Boulet will carry on Logan's legacy by recognizing April the 7th as Green Shirt Day, raising awareness of the need for registered organ and tissue donors so that access to life-saving and life-transforming transplants can be approved. Be it hereby resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the Village of Marrickville-Wolford does hereby declare April the 7th of each year as Green Shirt Day in the municipality to inspire organ donor registration in the Village of Marrickville-Wolford. I would just make one comment for Council's consideration. Not going to, everybody has a story. I can certainly speak on a personal family basis, the huge significant value in people signing their, and registering to be a donor. Don't need to hear any more details on that. Very personal and private, as I'm sure everybody's story would be. I think it's very appropriate that we do this recognition. The only comment I would make, I'm not sure about having for each year. We do not have a municipal policy in terms of annual recognitions. I don't know whether we would want to create a policy because it would be possibly difficult to determine what we'll say the qualifications are, the parameters are. I more than support this. I'm not sure that we want to have it as an annual recognition. I put that out to council members for consideration of those thoughts. Nonetheless, you've heard the motion. I see Mr. Cameron has his hand up for a question. Mr. Cameron.
Yeah, I think instead of overcomplicating it, it is something that that is beneficial, and by placing a simple notification on our website annually, and perhaps using our social media presence, we could, at a very minimal cost, just or sort of a reminder every April 7th to send out that message. I think instead of passing a bylaw or anything in that effect, it's just a simple recognition every April would be something that we should move towards. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cameron. Are there any other comments? I'll call the vote. All in favor?
Okay,
It's
so
carried.
and we're voting on what though? We're just voting on it as a one day or the annual?
The motion is the annual.
Okay, good.
Starting this April 7th and annually. And I think there was nodding of heads as Mr. Cameron indicated, we just have it annually, on our municipal webpage. That April 7th is the Green Shirt Day. And obviously a wee bit of background explanation provided with that. And that seems to be reasonable, certainly more than reasonable direction to staff, and reasonably easy to have in place so it comes up annually. And they're getting nods from staff. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, very much. And next, members, a request from our daycare nursery school regarding use of our community center fees. And I'll move in a second for that, please. Thank you, Mr. Foster. Thank you. Seconded by Mr. Malloy. Be it hereby resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the Village of Marrickville-Wolford does hereby receive correspondence from Krista Smith, member of the Marrickville Daycare Nursery School, regarding a rain barrel fundraising dated February the 16th, 2021 for information purposes, and that council does hereby waive the rental fees associated with the Marrickville Community Center for this event. Just to clarify with staff, so it is utilizing our community center, and the date Friday, April the 23rd. The request in the motion is for the waiving of the fees, which is, from my perspective, reasonable. Just the use of the community center, my understanding is that they will, whatever the process in terms of the delivery and picking up the rain barrels, they provided a plan, if you will, to municipal staff so that we're following health unit recommended guidelines vis-a-vis COVID-19.
That's correct, Your Worship, they have.
That's great, okay, thank you. Any questions on the motion? Mr. Cameron?
Yeah, in the resolution, it states February 16th, but in that was the date that we received the request, but the actual date they want is April 24th. Should the resolution not state April 24th to be the Rain Barrel fundraiser date?
Well, it would just be that we hereby does receive the correspondence, so the correspondence goes with the resolution, and in the correspondence, it indicates they want to use it on the community center on April 23rd.
Okay, so
Okay.
it's just indicating we received it on February the 16th? Correct, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. If there aren't any other questions, call the vote. All in favor? Now that is carried. Thank you. And next, members, there is correspondence to be received from Robbie Giles, the mover and a seconder for that, please. Moved by Mr. Moy, seconded by Mr. Helping. Be it hereby resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the Village of Miracle Wolford does hereby receive correspondence from Robbie Giles regarding Miracle Wolford wetland evaluation received February the 12th, 21 for information purposes. I'll call the vote on the motion. All in favor to receive for information purposes, and that is carried. Thank you. And members, you can see with, sorry, you have a question about
Is
the...
there not an ask at the end of this?
I'm sorry, Mr. Murray?
Is there not an ask at the end of this, letter? Matter of fact,
Just pause for a moment.
Yeah.
I got that. So the motion was to receive the correspondence for information purposes, and I'm just going to the correspondence from Mr. Giles. The ask is going on the last paragraph.
Yeah.
I would ask the council, its committees, and its staff work with the county, the ministry, RVCA, any other agency that has jurisdiction that impacts our natural environment to undertake and continue wetland designation efforts in order to provide data that will allow effective and efficient decision-making by this and future councils. So asking that we do it, I don't know that we could say, yes, we do.
Well, exactly, that's my point. It is an ask.
I would ask that we continue to do so. I'll use that phrase, right? To undertake and continue wetland designation. Certainly, if members wish, we can put it a little more formal, or other than perhaps the verbiage today. The verbiage today that I would use, as we have indicated past practice before, and would continue to do so, as we've done with developments in the last while, as the ministry says, and outlined in a recent newspaper article, and I think actually in correspondence with Mr. Giles via emails. I have responded to him before. We can do it again based on this letter that's been received for information purposes. That we do as recommended that municipalities may require municipalities require landowners, developers to undertake studies to determine the presence of any significant natural heritage features such as wetlands on properties that are subject of a planning application. Every time there's a planning application, it's not just a matter of us required, it is also required by, we'll say the senior levels of government, could include the county, but the other ministries as outlined. Private property owners, if they wish to, they do have an option themselves to have a qualified evaluation done. So we are following all, the requirements under the Planning Act. Every time there's an application, depending on what the application is, an evaluation is done by a qualified evaluator. So we can put that in, other than my comments today, can put in a more formal response, and perhaps staff could do that on behalf of council. Indicate that, depends what kind of direction we as a group want to do, whether you want it under the signature of the mayor or direct staff to indicate that. Mr.
Well,
Moore?
that's my point, though.
Yep.
My point is it's more than just a receive.
Yep,
We should respond to that.
no problem whatsoever. Mr. Foster?
Yeah, just to follow up on Councilor Malloy. So in the last paragraph, to undertake and continue wetland designation efforts, I'm just wondering, is he asking us to go to the county to designate more lands as wetlands, or? It's just referring to his letter. The underwriting task the council's committees and staff work with everyone to undertake and continue wetland designation efforts. I'm just not sure what he's asking for. We have the official plan, I brought mine with me here, but the official plan indicates that we have quite a bit of wetland. And now we have the aggregate influence areas as well. It seems like there's a lot of places you can't build in this township right now. I'm not sure if he's asking us to expand that or what he's asking for.
Well, my comment would be, and if council concurs, we are, we only do evaluations when there's an application under we'll say under the Planning Act, if that's the right terminology. Other than that, we do not undertake the process to go out and initiate finding properties to determine if they are wetlands or not. And if there's that concurrence, we could ask staff to draft something, capture that, and can go under the, just want to make sure, don't want to hang this on staff to say, oh, Mr. Giles, here, here's a letter from staff, or it can be under the signature of the mayor on behalf of council, whatever council members would prefer. We can ask staff to draft something and circulate it to council, and can formalize it, if you will, at the next council meeting. There isn't any urgency to give a response today, tomorrow kind of thing, and our next council meeting is on the 8th of March. So if everybody's comfortable with that, we could ask staff to draft something for council's consideration for response to the correspondence that we received today.
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
And everybody okay with that direction? Yep, very good. Staff, all right with that direction? Yep. Not all right with that. So you've captured the direction that we like. There we go. Thank you so much. And thank you, Mr. Malloy. And members, you'll note, we recall from the beginning of the meeting that approving our agenda, we are moving the request from Judith Thurman down under Public Works just after the bylaw regarding the memorial bench and tree policy, program policy. And members, next is the motion regarding our annual water report that is required to be sent to the province. So a mover and a seconder for that, please. Thank you, Mr. Foster. And a seconder, Mr. Cannon, yes, thank you. Be it hereby resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the Village of Marrickville Wolford does hereby receive the Marrickville Drinking Water System 2020 Annual Water Report from the Ontario Clean Water Agency, AQUA, issued February the 24th, 2021 for information purposes. And as indicate, the report is prepared to satisfy the annual reporting requirements under provincial regulations. All in favor? And that motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you. And next members, as requested by council to staff, information regarding our recycling program. So I have a mover and a seconder to get the report on the table and then the direction of staff. So move, we thank you, Mr. Malloy, and a seconder would be Mr. Helpy. Be it hereby resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the Village of Marrickville Wolford does hereby receive report PW-02-2021, being a report regarding the current recycling program for information purposes. And then there are three options outlined for council's consideration. The option one, the council does hereby direct staff to continue the contract recycling services of Limerick for Environmental Services Limited at the current cost of $45,152.02 per year until the producer-based program takes effect, with Marrickville Wolford slated for a 2023 rollout. Option two, the council does hereby direct staff to include costing in the 2021 budget to hire a qualified external consultant to do a request for pre-qualification, RFPQ, to obtain pricing and options for a new recycling program, to determine what the benefits would be to issue a request for proposal similar to that which was issued by the municipality of North Granville. Option three, the council does hereby direct staff to explore opportunities to partner with several other municipalities for one large recycling program as done by neighboring municipalities in Lanark. So there are three options the council could consider. I don't know if council has a preference. It's a very, very well outlined and detailed staff report. A lot of work has gone into that. It helps bring some clarification for council's consideration. I do have some views on it, but I'll turn to council members first, and I see first up is Mr. Cameron.
Thank you. By no doubt that we should be increasing our recycling program. It's an asset that we have to extend well into the future. I think as a supplementary, along with this report, I may be jumping ahead a little bit about committees, but it might be an opportunity to send a task to our environmental committee to come back with a more comprehensive report. We're in the process of building our population at present, and we've received a document from Public Works just a short time ago about the life expectancy of the landfill, and presently is up at around 100 years. If we look at reports about population growth in our area, in the next 10 years, it's predicted that our municipality will double in that number, which would reduce that landfill's life by 50%, which means the 100 years would soon drop to 50 years. And then 10 years after that, if we went up at another 50% rate, we'd be looking at losing that landfill at a rapid rate. We'd be down in 20 years, we'd be down to about a 5-year life expectancy. The recycling program that we have present is okay, but I think expanding that. Having worked at the landfill, I know that there's a lot more diversion that needs to take place. So tasking our environmental committee to come back with a more comprehensive report on actual costs of operation at present and what an expanded cost would be for recycling, and perhaps a cost that we would incur if we had to shut down the facility because we've expended the life expectancy of that. Or if we end up with an environmental issue, a lot of groundwater migrates from the landfill down in towards the Rideau River. You can see that at any rain event or the January thaw or the spring thaw, there's quite a bit of water that travels down. So I think an opportunity at present would be for us to to not wait for 2023 for our upper tier governments, but to start a more proactive approach. I know it's been a call every time we have a budget consideration. Mr. Malloy's brought it up many times. He's an advocate for recycling as well as I, and I'm sure the other councils at the table support that. So it would be, I think, to our advantage, considering we just approved Parkview and we have other considerations, and surrounding areas, populations are growing at a rapid rate, which means that we'll be in that position as well. So I was looking at Montague. There was a reference to Montague here. For their total, for garbage collection and for recycling, it's up over $336,000 per year, which is a significant cost compared to what we're doing for $45,000 recycling only. So if we are ever to lose that landfill, the significant costs would be, I think, kind of staggering for us as a smaller community to absorb. So I think moving in a proactive manner towards a more comprehensive study and direction for council to consider within the next 5 to 6 months would be an asset for us to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cameron. And actually, I do apologize. I should have asked staff if they wanted to speak to the report. And an indication of their findings is well written and presented. One do need to be careful, though, before I go to members, of things that are said, to make sure that they're, they actually reflect reality. And I'm just going to ask for a comment from our operations manager, Mr. Cole, when his report last year indicated that the life expectancy of the landfill site at the moment is in the magnitude of 100 years. It's based on a number of parameters outlined by the province that you look at, and to be able to make that determination. So it's not a subjective opinion; it's an objective conclusion. And part of that. And part of that projection of life expectancy is not just how we're managing it today, but it's also growth expectancy within the municipality. Is that an accurate statement, Mr. Cole?
No, Your Worship, yeah. It's not just a calculation by me, it's by our engineering firm that monitors our landfill site as well. And yes, you do consider in for growth, but 100 years is our current.
Yes, so it does take into account the development that may take place over that. So it's not a matter of if we increase the population by X percent in the next 5 or 10 years that we're going to cut in half the life expectancy of the landfill site from 100 to 50 years.
We don't expect that.
Yeah, not expectations. And the other thing is, just to clarify, we have, as required under the Minister of the Environment, we have the water testing around the landfill site to ensure that the plume is not only is not moving towards the Rideau River, but it's also not going into the Rideau River. Thank you. And anyway, if we get back to the report in terms of moving forward with some direction to staff regarding recycling. And I see Mr. Foster has his hand up, and then I think Mr. Malloy, you did as well.
Not yet.
Not yet?
Just a
Okay, thank
question
you.
for Mr. Cole. So in your report, the Township of Montague is in a contract with Terra Environmental at a cost of $157,000. That's just for the recycling?
Your Worship, that's correct. That's solely for recycling only.
And Councillor Cameron mentioned they pay another fee to Terra. They don't have a landfill. Is that correct? They do waste transfer?
That is correct. Their contract is actually through, their garbage contract is separate from the recycling contract, 2 separate companies.
So just the recycling is $157,000.
Correct.
Thank you. And the other question is regarding the what is recyclable. We have our listing. Have we, besides on our website, have we done any public education for basically for our residents as to what's recyclable and what's not? Because I understand, it seems to be changing. At one point, the plastic containers for windshield wiper fluid extractor, they're toxic waste and now they're recyclable? Or?
That was a bit of a confusion through the recycling program. The windshield washer fluid jugs were always accepted as long as they were cleaned out, as other plastic materials should be as well. And we do have pamphlets at the landfill to be given to residents, but we haven't actually done mailings. That's kind of what you were questioning for recycling. If I may, we actually are currently working on a new mail-out pamphlet to be sent out to residents in the very near future.
Thank you.
So if I could just, I'm not sure I captured the last part of that, Mr. Foster, Mr. Cole. So just for edification and what is part of the analysis in the staff report, it seems like we have the opportunity to recycle a lot, and we are recycling a lot, and indeed above and beyond what the province says you must do at a minimum. So the question sometimes arises, what is it that we are not recycling, if you will, and do we have any idea how much that might be? That may be difficult to determine how much is not being recycled in terms of what can be recycled, I guess. But from if I could, from a staff perspective, in terms of, what one thinks can be recycled and what we are recycling, that seems to be a pretty significant list to me. And I really hesitate to, I don't want to put staff on the spot. But, is there something, and I know that John's, what are we missing? Are we missing much? I mean, it's difficult to measure how much is, going into a landfill on two parts, filling a landfill, or should it be going somewhere else where it can actually be recycled and put into another product? And, we're not just stewards of our own municipality, our own landfill, we're, stewards everywhere. And if something is being collected and just going down the road somewhere else for the sake of not being in our landfill, is there anything good? Is there any good stewardship in that? I would suggest perhaps not. One opportunity is to refresh, not just on our website, but whenever the next drop bailing is, and sometimes that's when people get the refresher. They see something on a piece of paper in front of their eyes saying, "Oh, don't forget these are the items that we are able to collect for recycling." And another comment could be, why do we have this stuff that needs to be, why am I buying that? Why am I buying stuff that I can't use or we can't use in our municipality? It has to go somewhere to be recycled. And you could look at the, what's the impact to put it in a condition where it can go somewhere else to theoretically be recycled. And I think, it's not my example, it's somebody else's, but the peanut butter jar, it's got to be clean. So you turn on the tap. Well, we're using water to clean this thing, and what's the cost of getting that water to come out of my tap? And it's got to be warm water. So what's the cost of heating that water? And by the way, that water goes down a pipe somewhere. Oh, it's collected somewhere and it's being treated. So there's a cost there, and it hasn't gotten into my blue box yet. How much fuel and energy is being utilized for that? My other comment would be, and I guess I'm, like a lot of conversations around recycling, not meant to be a diatribe, but I bought a toaster last year. You wouldn't believe the packaging there was in the store. So when I got to the counter, I took all the packaging that I didn't want to buy, I don't need it, and I bought the toaster. And somebody said, "What about all this stuff?" I said, "What about it? I don't need it." So I'm not buying stuff that needs to be recycled when I'm able to, but that's maybe a little too much of an editorial comment. Everybody's nodding, "Yes, Mr. Mayor." Well, everybody else does it from time to time as well, I suppose. But when we look specifically what the province is doing, and it's, going to be available in terms of the Stewardship Ontario Blue Box program, the transition plan, by maintaining the contract we have on a monthly basis, we'll be ready to go out of the gate to jump on that bandwagon, if you will, and move forward with hopefully more items that can be added to the list of the items that we already collect for recycling at the moment. And again, it in part goes to that list of things that we do collect and recycle. Mr. Malloy, you're away, sir.
Okay, thank you.
And your mic, please. Your mic, or sorry, Tim, your mic.
Yeah.
Mike here, Tim.
I just want to ask Brad, is there any point in increasing the staff up on the landfill? I seem to remember, I forget how many years ago now, maybe 15 years ago, one of the staff members actually was up on the hill, and he watched people. No, way before you. Yeah, no, way before
Anyway,
you.
carry on.
And up on the hill, and was watching people as they threw stuff off. Because I've been up on the hill dumping off my leaves and things like this, and people will drive up and they get their bag, they throw their bag into that space, and you can hear the tin just rattling around inside the bag. And he was there, and he would, call people up and say, no, empty that, that goes down to recycling, you can't do that. Is there any possibility, is there any advantage to reinstating somebody up on top of the hill to monitor what, as best they can, what's going into the garbage, into the landfill? Thanks.
Your worship, it could be something that could be looked at to do that. We do send I guess we call it a chaser vehicle up sometimes, depending on what the load is brought in, but there isn't somebody that permanently stays at the top of the hill, due for several reasons, weather conditions, that kind of thing. But it is something we could explore.
Thank you.
Mr. Foster.
Yeah, just to Councilman Malloy's comment, we didn't have that garbage truck before either. So everybody went up on the hill to throw their garbage out. But now when you pull in, you throw your garbage into a garbage truck. Unless you're taking truckloads. Do you follow what I mean?
Yeah.
Before it was all our household waste that went up
Yeah, I
there.
understand.
Now the household waste doesn't go up there.
But not everybody throws into that garbage truck. I'm up there with my leaves and brush, and not brush, my leaves and stuff like that. And there's people coming up with trailerfuls of garbage bags, and they're being thrown in the.
Well, if that's the case, they should be paying by the bag.
Well, it could possibly be. I'm not sure that part of the equation, but I can hear people throwing bags in there, and you can hear the tin and stuff rattling around inside the bags. I'm just thinking maybe we should be monitoring it. Maybe give Brad and the guys up at the landfill another asset to monitor it.
Thank you for your comments. I'm sure staff will capture them and continue to have good operational practices at the landfill. So one is to get back to, for the direction, I'll go to Mr. Cameron in a moment, but looking at the three options outlined in the staff report. Mr. Cameron.
Yeah, just clarification for Councillor Malloy. You see people going up with bags in the trailers because they're bringing in a trailer load and they're charged by weight. Instead of putting their tags on their bags, they're including that in the trailer. And while I was working at the landfill, that was my job. When I was down there, we were using the garbage truck for people driving in. When anybody went up in the hill, I accommodated up the hill to ensure that they were disposing of their garbage properly. On Saturdays, to your point about hiring another staff member, I think it would be advantageous for us to do so, because on Saturdays, we can get upwards of over 300 people in a day. And our average, I believe, was 307, and that would fluctuate up into the 350s, 340s at some point. And on Wednesdays, we were receiving anywhere from 195 to 250 people on Wednesday. So 2 staff members, one monitoring the garbage truck and the recycling, and the community share shack, and the other gentleman handing out tags and selling tags and keeping his eye on the scale. You're stretched to your limits. You're processing somebody, every 4 or 5 seconds. So to have a more supervised, a more supervised visit, another staff member, I believe, would be an asset to us. Thank you.
So back to the motion, I'm going to put out there for members to consider the option 1, that we continue with our recycling contract, and so we're prepared to be able to move expeditiously, to use that word, when the province brings forward the producer-based program, which is slated to come out in 2023. If there aren't any other suggestions in terms of the 3 options, I'll put that out for council's consideration. And I saw Mr. Cameron and then Mr. Malloy.
I think option 2 and 3 would best suit. I think expanding and perhaps a more concentrated effort with the surrounding communities for an escalated formula would be probably far more advantage to us. Thank you.
Mr. Malloy?
Yeah, I was going to say option 3. I think we should be looking at option 3 and see what we can do with our neighboring municipalities and what we could, how we could coexist with them to pick up the recycling and make it worthwhile,
Sorry, Mr. Foster.
Yeah, I'd be in favor of option 1. The problems that I see with option 2, paying a consultant seems like an incredible waste of money. If we can start to process where our public works people keep an eye on what's recyclable in the area and by whom. The problem with option 3 is we're the pearl in this one, in that we have a landfill site. So partnering with other municipalities may mean that we take their unrecyclable loads or spoiled recyclables and take them to our waste site as part of our agreement. So I don't really see that as being a benefit to be involved with other municipalities. And I would just like to see that currently the costs are under control, spend more money on education, and look forward to the future with what the province is doing.
Mr. Helpney?
Yes, I like Councillor Bob that option number 1 is the best suited for us right now.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Roy, I don't want to get into too much debate back and forth, I'm just trying to determine which motion would move forward with a positive perspective.
But I think if
Malloy.
we look at option number 3, it says right there that it's one large recycling program, not their garbage. We're not taking their garbage in. It's just a recycling program with neighboring municipalities. So that we have one contractor who services, for argument's sake, services North Grenville, well, obviously not Montague, that's Lanark, North Grenville, maybe Elizabethtown, whatever's in the area, and they pick up the recycling, not the garbage, just the recycling. That's how I read option number 3.
No, my comment there to Councilor Malloy was that lots of times loads of recycling end up in a landfill. In fact, the tipping fees are built into a lot of recycling. That they will take it, examine it, decide whether or not it's clean enough or whether it's contaminated, and it'll go to a landfill. So there is a distinct possibility that what you're putting in your blue box is going to end up in the trail road dump in Ottawa or some other place.
So I know staff wanted to make a comment, Mr. Cole.
So for your work, just to clarify for Mr. Malloy, the recycling and garbage contract that I showed for Lanark County was a joint contract between recycling and garbage, just 2 different companies got the contract, but it was for recycling and garbage. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I understood that. Yeah.
Okay, set that. Mr. Cameron?
Now, I think what Mr. Malloy, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, I think what he's trying to tell us is that if we partnered with other municipalities, we may get a better pricing, because we only store the recycling here until it's removed. We don't actually recycle here, or we don't take any of the recycling and dump it into our landfill. And by partnering, it may give us a better pricing unit. I think that's something that would be worth looking into. And the aspect of hiring a consultant, we do have committees, and we should be using the committees to our full advantage. We do have an environmental committee, and I think by using that resource and allowing them to come up with a comprehensive study of how council should move forward presently and into the future, I think would be something that would be to our advantage. Thank you.
No.
Well, in the meantime,
What, it looks like option one is what we can do in the meantime, because whether we do 2 or 3, we're moving off to. So everything includes option one right now. Is that what you all agree logically?
So I'm going to suggest to members of council that the motion would be for option one, and then ask that, kind of in the area of that option 3, to bring some clarity as to what might be involved, or some clarity in terms of how the, we'll call it that collective program is working in Lanark County, and how it may or may not be something that would be beneficial for Mayor Wolford to consider. In the meantime, we go with option one. I think it was more or less what Mr. Foster was saying. And so the motion does not have to read, well, I guess it could read, and that council does hereby direct staff to explore opportunities to partner. I guess in that it would be bring back some information as how that system is working in Lanark County, and whether there, what it might take to be part of and or buy in. If that's a reasonable request, and I see our manager of operations indicating that is in that area of reasonable request. It doesn't have to be done obviously immediately, but the information is there. I'm sure if there is more than 2 municipalities in Lanark County involved in that, they must have had some background information as to why it was beneficial for them, and that could be shared with us. Okay. Thank you very much. So I'll indicate that it's option 1, and I'll also indicate option 3. They're concurrent, and based on that, I'll call the vote. All in favor? And thank you. That's carried. Again,
So 1
thank
and
you
3.
to thank you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mr. Rowley?
1 and 3, eh?
yeah.
1 and 3?
Correct.
Okay.
And again, want to thank staff, although I'm sure there are more than a few people or staff members involved in bringing this report together. It's a great report for council consideration. And again, I think it was commented at some point during the discussions, a great opportunity not only to on our webpage, but when next time there's a drop mailing of some sort, to remind the community the many things that can be recycled. And again, it's above and beyond sometimes the conversation, but what staff have already put in place regarding the electronics and batteries. That's a great program for to not only have those kinds of products going in our landfill site to be collected and utilized somewhere else. So thank you for that. And next, members, is for consideration is the bench and tree policy, memorial bench and tree policy. So a mover and a seconder for that, please. Thank you, Mr. Foster, and seconded by Mr. Cameron. Be it hereby resolved that bylaw 12-2021 being a bylaw to adopt a memorial bench and tree policy be read a first and second time, and that bylaw 12-2021 be read a third and final time and passed. Is there anything additional staff wanted to comment on in the report, Mr. Robertson or Mr. Cole? Any questions from members of council? Mr. Cameron?
Thank you. I'd like to have perhaps the bylaw altered slightly. I think there should be an option that if there's a fundraiser and there's a bench or a tree or a plaque donated and funds have been allocated by a fundraiser to pay for that, as long as they meet the requirements within our bylaw. So if they're meeting those requirements, they shouldn't have to buy through us. And I think a charge for installation should be waived. I think we should be supporting that part of the bylaw as an in-kind offering. These are people that have dedicated themselves to the community and have done so for many, many years, community individuals or groups, which are a great asset, and they make our municipality community, and by charging for labor, I think it would be a kind gesture that we supply that as an in-kind service and a thank you for their many years of dedication. And I think if we altered that bylaw allowing that to happen and allowing them also to provide the tree and the bench and the plaque on their own through a fundraising effort, as long as they meet the standards within that bylaw, I think that would be a good way to go. Thank you.
Mr. Foster?
I'm just curious about Councillor Cameron's comment about, like, not every bench will necessarily be a memorial to someone who's done extensive work in the village. This is an opportunity for people to have a memorial for a loved one. So saying that we should install the benches and trees, et cetera, for free, and they should be able to put up whatever they want. It's really, the idea of having benches, a consistent bench that's built to a certain construction standard, the village should control that. That's all there is to it, because we are maintaining these benches as well. We're also doing the install on them so that they're put where we want them. I think if you wish to have a memorial for someone, if you want a bench, then be prepared to pay for it, that's all. And the tree at $50, that doesn't seem that bogus.
Thank you for that comment, but that's why I said if they meet, if it meets the requirements within the bylaw. So if it meets the standards within our bylaw for the bench structure itself and the plaque, there states in the bylaw that there's certain parameters that they have to operate within. I believe if a bench is donated and it meets those requirements, we shouldn't force an individual or a group to buy the bench through us if they fundraised and paid for the bench. As long as that bench, plaque, or tree meets the requirements within the bylaw. The only thing I'm suggesting that we offer for free is the labor part, the installation, as a thank you to the community members or group for their many years of dedication.
But how do you know, are you going to have a criteria? If you worked 10 years in the village, you get a bench? But if you, and what I'm saying, Mike, is we don't know who's going to be memorialized. So saying that we're thanking them for their efforts for the village, we have no idea who it's going to be.
That's what the bylaw policy states. It's a memorial bylaw for trees.
Yes, it's in case someone wants to put a memorial to a loved one.
Yes, and that can be defined. Everybody has a different definition of love. I mean, one person may love their neighbor and another may not. So, I mean, I think we're getting a little bit too deep into this. All I'm suggesting is that if there's a proposal that we allow that bylaw a little flexibility and allow them to supply a bench if they've raised the funds, and that bench or plaque or tree meets the requirements within the bylaw stated, and that if there's any requirement for us to the labor, that we should give that for free. I think that would be a thank you.
Mr. Malloy?
Yeah, just on the same line, so I think what we should do is...
Sir, you mic?
Oh, sorry. What we should do is the municipality should set up a protocol by which we can judge, or judge, that's the wrong word, but by which we can monitor what benches are going up and for whom. So No, you know what, you can react like that, but that's absolutely true. We have limited space. We have limited space. We're not gonna be able to put a bench up for everybody and anybody. So if we're gonna be doing it, then you've gotta monitor it somehow so that you can prioritize, shall we say, where the benches go and who the benches are going for. I believe that. I don't think that's an outlandish suggestion. That would be my opinion. But the municipality should set up a protocol by which we can make those assessments.
And ask you to turn your mic off, Mr. Malloy. And the chair recognizes Mr. Foster.
That would be an interesting committee to be on, to judge people's merit, whether or not they deserve a bench, and what criteria you use.
We do it all the time. We do it all the time. We make decisions based on the facts. And sometimes those decisions are not do not benefit some people, and sometimes they benefit some people. It's just a matter of making decisions. It's what you were elected to do, make decisions.
But not character judgments.
I'm not making character judgments.
I think you'd say if staff brought something forward that is appropriate for consideration to have in place, given just in the last, it seems the last while, there have been 2 or 3 requests for such things, and it's a good to have a policy in place. It uses a guideline. I don't think it's unreasonable to say, for people to know that there is a cost to doing this, and the cost, pardon me, is reflected. I'm sorry. That there are costs associated with somebody wanting a memorial bench put in place, that the taxpayers, the municipality provide those dollars for. So I don't think it's unreasonable. But then again, it would not be unreasonable for, whether it's a group or an individual, to say, yes, I would like to have a tree or a bench. I can, pay for that tree or bench. They don't have to say, I can't afford, but they can say, would you consider waiving the fees? And that brings it to the council table, and can council consider at that time, as we do with just, earlier in our agenda this evening. We have fees for using the community center. The daycare asked that we're using, would you waive the fees? And we took that into consideration. And as it turned out, we did waive the fees. So this allows someone to come forward and, through the process, through staff onto a council agenda to waive fees, and they can indicate, make that determination at that time. I think it's reasonable to have a fee structure in place associated with the bylaw. I would think more importantly, it's appropriate to have a policy in place as we talked about. So those would be my comments. Mr. Malloy.
Just an observation, in the fee schedule, Schedule A there, I'm just curious, having done this for a good number of years, buying trees on behalf of the municipality and getting them installed by having Brad and his crew installing them, the $50 for a tree.
Installation.
That's just the installation?
Yes.
So, and it's $1,500 for the bench? That's not the bench itself then?
We'll get clarification from staff.
That is the bench as well.
So what's the $50 then?
It's considered man hours, equipment, and the time to install the tree.
Okay, what about the cost of the tree though, itself?
Well, that person's buying it.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that help? If there aren't any new questions or comments? New question or comment? Mr. Cameron?
Yes, how does this reflect on Nick's request that we've already passed for his bench memorial?
The one for the going at the cenotaph?
Yeah,
Leslie Strutt.
for Leslie.
Well, Leslie Strutt,
Yeah.
So I still can't.
For Leslie Strutt. That's Nick's.
The council's already approved that.
So this bylaw would have no effect on
Correct.
his request, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
The word that comes to mind is somebody's grandfather, but I'll defer to staff for some clarification, perhaps it would help.
So thank you, Your Worship. That's a good question. It depends on council's will, of course, whether you want policy to be retroactive or not. That was approved by council, has not been executed yet. Creates a little bit of a procedural question for council and what council would wish.
There's always, something new, it happens right around the time of things happening, and as I recall the conversation with members of council, we looked favorably upon the request. We gave direction to staff to let them know that yes, they can have a bench at the Cenotaph Park, and it was as a result of that, council said, it would be good to have some kind of a policy in place. So subsequent to that approval, staff have brought back a policy. From my perspective, that bench, does not need to conform with the policy, I guess if I word it that way. So it's a green light, if you will, for that bench to move ahead. Mr. Malloy.
So does that mean the one that's on the table now has to conform to the policy? We do have one on the table also.
Yep. Well, we could make that, that would be the logic, Mr. Malloy, yes.
Okay.
So, members, you've heard the motion, I'll read it again. Be it hereby resolved that bylaw 12-2021, being a bylaw to adopt a memorial bench and tree policy, be read a first and second time, and that bylaw 12-2021 be read a third and final time and passed. All in favor? And opposed? And the motion is carried. And next, members, there is a request for a bench, so if a mover and a seconder with this, please. Thank you, Mr. Malloy. And a seconder would be, thank you, Mr. Foster. Be it hereby resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the Village of America Wolford does hereby receive correspondence from Judith Herman and family regarding a request for a bench installation in memory of Colin Herman dated February the 25th, 2021 for information purposes, and that council does hereby approve the installation and dedication of a bench to be located in the new Merrickville Public Square in memory of Colin Herman. And I don't know, do we need to add it here in the motion in accordance with the village policy, or is that a given that we've just approved the policy?
Well, thank you, Your Worship. Given that you're considering this after the policy, I would suggest you don't need to amend the motion for that.
Okay.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. And I think should council pass this in staff getting back to the family, they would let them know that there is a policy and hear the terms of the policy.
Certainly, Your Worship, we will.
Yeah. Thank you. Mr. Foster.
As regards the parquet, if there was a certain amount of design went into that, does it include needing more benches?
Thank you, Your Worship. It does. In fact, we are required to have a bench there to meet AODA requirements, accessibility requirements. So
Sorry, it's mumbling, but if you wouldn't mind, just for a moment.
Sorry, Your Worship.
It's okay.
It does, in fact, require a bench in the parquet, in the new public square, rather, to meet accessibility requirements. You have to have seating there. And I'm not sure if it's in the letter or not, Your Worship. I just want to draw your attention to the fact that the landscape architect that did the design of the public square is actually the son-in-law for Mr. Herman.
Okay.
So I thought that was very appropriate.
So,
Interesting connection. Thank you for that. Mr. Foster.
just to follow up then, so having a uniform bench policy would be a benefit in this particular case because the benches in that parquet would be the same, obviously.
Correct, Your Worship, and I think most municipalities, just to carry on from Councillor Foster's comment, most municipalities would want a uniform street furniture design. You'd want consistent design throughout the municipality.
Thank you. So if there aren't any other questions on the request, I'll call the vote. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. And next, members, we do have the report regarding committees and advisory committee meetings. And so there is the recommendation for moving forward with Zoom, but also contained in the report some direction to staff for, and this is part of the amendment to our agenda, to do a call for volunteers for our planning advisory committee, our I'm trying to think of the name of the other committee.
Community development. Community development.
And our Community Development Committee and Property Standards. Those three committees are short, one member each. So we'll ask the direction would be for staff to do a notification call for people to sit on those committees.
Correct, Your Worship. So just to clarify for protocol, what we have in the report is the recommendation regarding the two of the committees, CDAC, Community Development Advisory Committee, and Planning Advisory, and we have a separate resolution to follow this regarding the third committee.
For the property standards.
Correct, Your Worship.
Perfect. Okay, that's great. So I'll get the motion on the table and move it in a seconder, please. Thank you. Moved by Mr. Cameron and seconder Mr. Foster. Yes, thank you. Be it hereby resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the Village of Mayor Wolford does hereby receive report CAO-04-2021, being a report to provide council with the options regarding council and advisory committee meetings for information purposes. And the council does hereby direct staff to bring back a bylaw to amend the village's procedure bylaw 30-17 to allow for electronic participation in meetings. And the council does hereby direct staff to bring back a bylaw to amend the terms of reference of advisory committees to allow for electronic participation in meetings. And the council does hereby give favorable consideration to the implementation of virtual council and advisory committee meetings through Zoom to be live streamed via YouTube. And the council does hereby direct staff to issue a public call for volunteers to replenish the membership of the Community Development Advisory Committee and the Planning Advisory Committee. Any questions on the motion? Mr. Cameron?
No question, more or
Okay,
less a
well,
comment.
that's what I wanted to go with questions first. I'll just go that for any questions on the motion.
Well, I
Okay.
have a comment I'd like to state. Just the resume of committees are a welcoming feeling, and they enhance the part of council, an important asset to the municipality. Things don't happen without them. Their dedication and guidance to council and community are a resource that we're thankful for. I'd just like to say that myself and I would believe the rest of the council appreciates the fact that we're getting back to normal business, and I know a lot of committee members are as well. Thank you.
Great. If there aren't any other comments, I'll call the vote. All in favor? Let's carry. Thank you. And this is was the addition to the agenda regarding property standards. So we'll move to the seconder for that, please. Thank you, Mr. Helpney. Seconder, thank you, Mr. Malloy. Be it hereby resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the Village of Mayor Wolford does hereby direct staff to issue a call for volunteers for Property Standards Committee. Are there any questions? I'll call the vote. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Those last two, well, not the last two, I've made reference earlier to the staff report on recycling and the staff report that we just considered and passed regarding our advisory committees. Significant amount of work went into those reports by many members of staff, my understanding from Mr. Robertson, and a lot of care and consideration, which we've been practicing since, my goodness, virtually a year ago, since September the 13th when our emergency control group met, March the 16th when the province declared the state of emergency with the pandemic. I don't think there is a person that does not recognize the value of the decisions and directions that our municipality and collectively have made to keep people safe and out of harm's way, if you will, from COVID-19, the virus. There isn't anybody sitting amongst our staff or on council that would love to have things normal, including our advisory committees. We know they're of value to us. It's a collective opinion, again, if you will, of council and staff. It is going to be great to have our advisory committees being able to get together and working again. And we just want to make sure, and with the staff report, we have a way to do it. And then ensuring that, we keep all our Ts and Is crossed. Staff have also said there's some tweaking to do, if you will, in terms of our procedural bylaws to ensure that we continue to be accountable and following the right rules and guidelines that we have in place. So again, appreciate staff for the tremendous work that they have done over the last year, but more particularly on this report, so that we can move forward in a very positively. So on behalf of council, thank you very much for that.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Richard.
And now I have a confirmation bylaw. Mover and a seconder, please. Thank you, Mr. Foster. It's seconded by, sorry, I circled Mr. Helpney. If you're okay to move the motion, Mr. Helpney. Thank you. And the seconder was Mr. Malloy. Be hereby resolved that bylaw 13-2021, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the regular council meeting of March the 8th, 2021, be read a first and second time, and that bylaw 13-2021 be read a third and final time and passed. All in favor? And that's carried. And I'll have a motion to adjourn. Mover and a seconder, please. Thank you, Mr. Foster. And seconded by Mr. Malloy. Be it hereby resolved that this regular meeting of the Council of the Corporation of the Village of America Wolford is now adjourned at 3:45 p.m. until the next regular meeting of Council on Monday, March the 22nd, 2021 at 2 p.m. or until the call of the mayor is subject to need. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you all very much.